Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. As you know, this stemmed from, I think, my weekly webinar about 2 weeks ago, where we had a lot of Philadelphia-specific questions, and we realized maybe we should be having a Philadelphia-specific webinar. And the whole Philadelphia team, various departments, have really stepped up and are joining us here today. We have Streets Department, L&I, we have Department of Health, we have everything relating to outdoor dining. Any questions you can have, we hope to answer for you today. A few housekeeping things I do want to discuss before we get started. This is purely for informational purposes. So one, everything you hear today, whether you like it or don't like it, or you think it's fair or not fair, that's not the purpose of this webinar today. The purpose is to answer your questions and provide information. Second, we will be muting all lines, so any questions you have, please put them in the chat box. Once we're finished our presentations, I will read through the questions one by one and give the various city departments an opportunity to answer those questions. So please do not unmute yourself. If you do, you will be muted again and potentially sent out of the room in terms of any disruptions, because I know we have a ton of people on, we have a ton of questions. And so with that, again, I want to thank, we're going to start with Mike Carroll. We're going to have Palak Raval-Nelson talk about after that regarding Department of Health, and they're just going to go over everything you need to know. And like I said, we will take questions at the end. So with that, Mike, you want to kick us off with some outdoor dining stuff?
Yeah, and I don't have control over the presentation, so whoever does, if I can just sort of call out, that would be great. And so just a quick overview, and then I'm going to ask actually kind of flip through things really quickly just to show this presentation. I'll talk about a few things, and Palak is going to come back and talk about a few things. So,
yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Palak, how are you doing? So, you know, just by way of overview, people, if you'll let me give you a little history, we kind of started thinking about this in late May. You know, it was probably about May 23rd, 24th, 25th when the idea of actually trying to do this became firm. And that wasn't that long ago. That was about, you know, just over 2 months ago. And so I feel really good about the amount of progress we made. You know, we're as a city government, not always credited with jumping on things quickly, but, you know, given about, geez, probably about 9-10 weeks, we really have a pretty impressive program. I'll pat our collective backs about that. Not to say it's perfect though. So we're going to work as hard as we can to improve it over time. But, you know, things are happening in real time. And, you know, just along those lines, we kind of thought this was coming. When we looked at where we were, it was still stage red, and outdoor dining actually at that point was not permitted until stage green. So we thought that we were going to have, you know, a pretty extended period of time before it actually started happening. But later that week, perhaps because of some work that you guys did with the state, you know, with the governor's office, it got added to stage green, and it became very real very quickly. And we implemented a program which was based on emergency powers that were delegated to the mayor, but then, you know, quickly understood that council should be involved, and so worked on some legislation. We're just finalizing the second of 2 sets of regulations that allow for this work to happen, to make sure that all the enforcement and the whole process is legitimate from a legal perspective, from the city's regulatory perspective, I should say. And we've seen there's been a lot of changes along the way. And some of that is because we're getting new guidance from the health department in the city. Some of that's because the governor's office is reacting in real time. And, you know, the bottom line is that the pandemic has a mind of its own, so to speak. You know, the pandemic's going to do what the pandemic has to do. And, you know, the fight against the pandemic is highly reactive. And so, you know, you go through several chains of reaction. We're kind of in the third or fourth line of reacting to things. And so that often means that we're kind of working out both the common sense from a business perspective, along with the common sense and the science of public health at the same time. and constantly trying to reconcile those things. And I'll say this, I'm really proud of the business community here in the city of Philadelphia. I think generally you guys have been very responsible and thoughtful in the way that you're approaching that. You look around the country and that's not always the case. And it's, you know, downright alarming, some of the decision making that's been made, you know, even in the context of a lot of uncertainty in other places around the country. And, you know, frankly, in other parts of the state, you know, I've been a little concerned by the rush that people have made to kind of get back to normal before anyone's ready to get back to normal. And also by the kinds of frictions that have popped up in different places. You know, some of that we've seen, but not a lot of it. But I think you guys are generally getting it. You know, the business community, the hotel, leisure, entertainment community here generally is getting it, and that's good, and it gives us something to work with. And so our orientation is always to try and work with you, to partner with you to make this make sense and to figure out the best way that, you know, folks can maintain their livelihood. We can provide a service to people, but we can also stay safe. And I just want to, you know, kind of congratulate everybody to getting this point, understanding that there's a lot more work to do. So if we can real quickly just kind of thumb through this overview, that'll help me get oriented and then gives people a sense for what this presentation is going to look like. There's some additional information that's online and on www.phila.gov. I think it's if you type in "safer at home," you'll get to the same page, and that's the way I remember doing it. But I think it's "restart with care" is what it is now. But if you type in phila.gov/safer at home, you can scroll down to the travel, entertainment, and I think restaurants section, and it has all of the detailed guidance, the applications, and so forth. But why don't we just flip through real quickly here, not super quickly, each of these slides so we can see what we'll talk about today.
Hey, Mike, I'm sorry, Mike, that's the health department slide deck. I believe that's up there.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Okay.
And so what I wanted to do, Palak, is I want to focus in a little bit on the barriers and kind of see, as everyone else is seeing, which of these slides are best for my talking points. I don't think we're queued up for the restart guidance. I'm sorry, the restaurant dining guidance, which the streets and oTIS worked on. So we'll make do with this, and then
No, I'm sorry. I'm just going to go ahead and go over these slides. That's all I was about to say.
So I might need to steal a little bit of your thunder on.
Go for it. Go for it.
All right. So why don't we go through real quickly? And Palak's going to cover mask and facial covering, and she'll give a lot more detail on the barriers and distance pieces, but I'll try and talk to these from my perspective before she digs in deep. So whoever has the control, would you go on to the next one? Okay, keep going. Okay, so we're basically kind of showing you what to do here. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the barriers, issues. Keep going. So we'll talk a little bit about the distance. Okay, here's one I'll focus on. All right, here's a good one. Keep going. All right, here's one I'm going to focus on. Keep going. All right, this is good. Keep going. Okay, keep going. All right, keep going. All right, great. Keep going. Keep going. All right. Okay, so why don't you go back and then let's go to the social distancing. Okay, so why don't we jump in at the social distancing one? Okay, so go to the next slide and then actually, there you go, that's perfect. So, you know, we're making different types of situations available for people for outdoor dining. And essentially there's 4 categories that we're looking at. We're kind of reopening the sidewalk cafes and extending the opportunity for sidewalk cafes throughout the city. So traditionally, sidewalk cafe licenses were only available in Center City, plus a few kind of edges of what people consider Center City. And this is kind of the longstanding practice that we entered this pandemic under. But in order to stimulate the activity, what we did was we extended that so that it's citywide. And we, with cooperation of council, established a 3-day review period so people can go online, to LNI, the Eclipse system. And if you have a food license, you probably already are familiar with Eclipse. You need a food license to get any of these outdoor dining options, okay? So you get that application done. A handful of those applications are held to the side because they involve either a setup or they're in a location which require more scrutiny from the streets department. And then there's going to be a few which, just because there's really no clear way to work it out, aren't going to work given the spatial dimensions mostly as a sidewalk cafe. So if you go through the other options, there's 3 completely different options we have. One is what we call a streetery, which is use of the parking lane. One is what we have set up as a temporary street closure, and I'll talk quite a bit more about that, which allows you to use more of the street, more of the right-of-way in a slightly different way. And then the last one is temporary lot use. And if you look at this picture here in the upper right-hand corner, that is the use of a parking lot in order to accommodate outdoor dining. And that's perfectly legitimate, requires for a temporary zoning permit you get through LNI, and they're committed to try and turn that around pretty quickly. So that, again, hopefully is a 3-day or so opportunity for folks who have a parking lot or are adjacent to a privately owned lot to set up their outdoor dining. Okay, go to the next slide. So go one more. Okay, here we go. So this, again, shows sort of a patio setup on the one side. Again, that's sort of something that LNI can let you do. Now I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit and talk about the slide to the side. You could imagine that for one of our street closures, it would look something like this. That to me looks like sort of a patio space. The key here is that the spacing is just way too close, and Palak will talk about that a little bit more. But the idea that we're trying to play off of is if you can't use the sidewalk because the sidewalk is too narrow, there's too many extensions, and let's take that concrete path as sort of a sidewalk. All of that space which is off of the sidewalk can then be used in a different way. And so between the curbs, we've got a lot more opportunity to spread people out. That may be because the sidewalk has to be kept open for other businesses to get, other essential activities to get access to that can't be blocked by sidewalk cafe. Or we could actually include parts of the sidewalk in what we call an extension of premises from the face of the building into and across the sidewalk, across what would normally be a parking lane and into the street for some dimension. So go to the next slide. One more. Okay, go one more. Okay, so this isn't quite showing me what I want. Go one more, maybe we've got another one. Okay, no, this isn't. One more. Okay, yeah, this doesn't show it. One more slide. Okay, we don't have it here. So what essentially we're trying to do is kind of create as much as possible like a dining room setup when we're looking at these street closures. And the dining room setup can be accommodated in one of 2 ways. One is where we maintain a center aisle down the middle of the street, and that center aisle essentially allows us to use the sidewalk as if it's the face of the building. And I'm going to see if I can open up another graphic that shows that a little bit more clearly. And that is going to need to be ADA compliant. We're going to need to address people's access not just to the other side of the closure, but also to bathrooms and the tables. And people have to be able to sit down and eat themselves if they're in a wheelchair or they have some other disability. And if I could be given permission, I did just find it, so I'm going to try and share the screen. I cannot while this other person is sharing. So could we take this graphic, this PowerPoint down, and maybe I can get access? Okay, let's see here. Okay, can people see this? Somebody? Anybody?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
That's great. Okay, so let me minimize my.
Good sharing, Eric.
Okay, so I skipped ahead, but we'll go back and talk about street users in a second. But you can see that these businesses essentially are just kind of treating the sidewalk and let's call it the first 8 to 16 feet of the asphalt as part of their establishment, as a patio, you know, with a step in it. And, you know, what we would want is for there to be sort of an entranceway, and that entranceway is probably going to need to be along this central path. And then, you know, that central path basically takes on the function of sort of like a trail or a promenade or, you know, a sidewalk. People are going to need some ramp access to get up to the sidewalk to use a bathroom. The sidewalk itself could be occupied with tables. You know, it can sort of serve a function as a queuing space. The staff can kind of come out and then kind of survey the situation and socially distance. But, you know, you can see this sort of delineation captures that part of the sidewalk and makes it part of the business, okay? So that setup works because you've got plenty of room to spread out. And we're not worried in this setup with people who are crossing, you know, bumping into people with trays and kind of getting in the middle of things because they're all in this central area getting back and forth, okay? So we kind of want to lean towards this way of doing things, but it's not necessarily the only way that we can accommodate. And I want to kind of take a look at a slightly different setup. I'm not sure we got the graphic in this version, but I'll go back and we'll just talk over it. Let's see. Okay, so an alternate way is what we actually were able to do with the inaugural closure in Old City District, where essentially they captured the whole middle of the street and made the dining room from curb to curb. They had 1 or 2 breaks in that setup where they had some information booths, and then they used the sidewalk as that path back and forth. And the sidewalks are kind of highly obstructed. You know, in Old City, they're very narrow along that stretch of 2nd Street. You know, we decided to see how it worked. It worked pretty well. They were able to put some seating along the face of the building. Some of that seating needed to be moved because they set up on Bilco doors, these sort of cellar doors. That's not okay. You know, we have a lot of liability to worry about, you know, with that kind of thing on everyone's part. But, you know, that did allow people who could get on the sidewalk clear access to a table if they were in a wheelchair. So that addressed the ADA issues. And for the most part, they were able to manage the traffic to and from the inside of the building to these dining rooms without too much trouble. You know, I feel like it's a little bit more challenging in some respects, maybe a little bit easier setup though. And so that's something that's worth reflecting on. You know, we don't really have kind of like a weekly update with the lessons learned, but, you know, we actually do a verbal one, but, you know, we don't have a document on that, but we could probably share a few notes on how that worked and, you know, why that may be a better option in some locations, but we're interested in seeing how this works too. And so this is sort of our default, is to try and make this the way that it goes forward. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and we're gonna talk a little bit about streeteries. And this is another option that we made available where we felt like the sidewalk wasn't gonna provide either enough space for any setup, or there was an interest in doing both sidewalk cafes and the streeteries. But certainly when the sidewalks are too narrow, this is the next thing we're going to look at. Whereas the street closures are temporary and they're sort of episodic thus far. So you get a weekend. We've gone up to what I'll call a 60-hour closure, where you get set up on a Friday afternoon and then you shut it down on a Sunday. This kind of parking lane setup we can leave permanently, you know, given the fact that recognizing that there's going to be sometimes utility work, paving work, other kinds of streets work that displace this kind of setup. But aside from that, it can be up pretty much 24/7, you know, with operation during the business hours. We need a minimum dimension for the tables. We need to make sure we're comfortable that there's good clearance between this and traffic. It extends pretty much the face of the building unless people are requesting to extend it in front of the adjacent businesses. So with the sidewalk cafes and with the streeteries, you have the option of getting a letter from your immediately adjacent business on either side to ask if you can use their frontage, either in the street for the streetery or along the sidewalk, in order to extend and create more space for more tables, better social distancing, you know, so forth. No more than just the adjacent businesses, though. We don't necessarily want one establishment to extend all the way down the block. You know, you're going to quickly run into the limits of your allowable occupancy. We're concerned about the kind of traffic along the length of the block, you know, for people who are providing service, traffic to the bathroom and so forth. So, you know, in order to make sure this is manageable, where we're at now is that those immediately adjacent businesses on either side, including if necessary around the corner, to allow that to take place. So the streeters have been working pretty well. We have had a few instances where, because of utility work, they've had to be displaced. You know, if there is no platform, it's pretty easy just to get that stuff out of the way and put it back. We're trying to coordinate with the utilities to make sure there's minimal disruption as much as possible, but this has worked out as a pretty good option. Now, there are some that have platforms. If you're looking for a platform, there's some advantages. You know, you can create ADA accessible dining opportunities on the platform. You know, if you're using a portion of the sidewalk that works out well, there's more continuity. You know, it's a little bit more robust. It might be a much more pleasant place for people to kind of, you know, kick back, more protection from traffic. So there's a number of reasons to do it, but, you know, not every platform is, you know, of superior design or construction. So the streets department's going to want to look at it to make sure it fits with the kinds of street platforms we've been doing for the better part of 5 years, albeit not so much around dining. It just meets a certain standard. State routes currently are off limits for any additional streeteries of any kind. We're working with the state to address that. We need a little bit more time to sort things out, because it's not just the state that is involved. Also, FHWA got involved. The state established interim guidance, and then FHWA stepped in and said, well, we'd like to take a look at that and we want to be involved. You know, I think, and the main reason is they want to be sure of the crash worthiness and kind of the protection of traffic. So from a safety standpoint, they want to set some ground rules, at least have review. PennDOT also is very concerned about that. And they've set in place, you know, certain design standards, certain materials and devices that they expect to see, and they want to review. And, you know, we anticipated this to some extent. So we sort of drew a map that said on these portions of the map, you're going to need to be, you know, going through the streets department, get this extra scrutiny before you move forward. That is somewhat in flux. The type of scrutiny, what's required, you know, what we can approve, that's sort of in flux. But my hope is in the next week or two that that's sorted out with the state, and we can move forward again to get these things stood up. If we run into situations where the situation is a little bit dire, and it's not possible along a state route to get something put up, but the business really desperately needs something, we have an option that we're working out for what we would call a street closure, but essentially in some respects may operate as more like a sidewalk cafe or a streetery. Now one of them is fairly straightforward. Anyone who's seen construction in Center City has seen a pedestrian chute along the curb on the surface of the asphalt. And we can set that up with, you know, water-filled barriers or some sort of crash-worthy barriers, which allows pedestrians to get off the sidewalk, go down the block, and get back on the sidewalk. And what that could do is free up the sidewalk space for tables. We have yet to try this out, but, you know, this is not a novel application. So We feel like similar authority that we have in order to do facade renovation or, demos allows us to do this. And, we're working that out with the state. They have a few questions, but we think we can move forward. If we want to kind of flip it, we expect to also have that option as well, where we maintain the sidewalk for pedestrian traffic, but we put these barriers in the asphalt and instead set tables up. And, we'll be interested to perhaps hear feedback from people whether they prefer the dining on the sidewalk or the dining on the asphalt. I'm sure the amount of space available is going to factor in, but also the exposure to traffic is different. Some of the costs will be different because you'll need to ensure that the ADA access is superior, in the dining in the asphalt model as well. So, these platforms are something that may be required in the state and FHWA guidance. So, if that's ultimately the case, we're going to need to make sure that we give adequate review for that and we resolve any conflicts with street work, because it's much more of an issue breaking down a platform and getting that out of the way than it is for on the asphalt dining with just tables and chairs. Let me move on and, just kind of flip through some of the other graphics here. This is the guidance I was referring to that's online. In addition to kind of the boiled down do's and don'ts that Palak's going to talk about more, really addressing the public health issues. You can see that our guidance also talks about some things which are about maintaining the right of way. We try and much as possible to reinforce the public health guidance as much as we can. This is probably the second or third iteration of some of this guidance. Here you can see the pedestrian chute setup that I've talked about. ADA compliance is extremely important. We want to make sure that we have the option of either constructing something, ad hoc, just based on the dimensions that we're dealing with, but you also should be aware that there are vendors that sell devices. I can't, quote you a cost, but a lot of this stuff is accessible online. And we, I believe, are going to link to some of the guidance with specifications for that type of material. So you can kind of put it down and pick it up. So that would be the advantage of using that type of approach. When we're looking at the different types of delineation, protection from the street, the most important thing is going to be the endpoints and sort of like the first 50 feet. Make sure that that's crash worthy, but in some applications, perhaps on slower streets, we may have the option to use different types of materials, especially where we don't think there's a lot of traffic. Let's see here, and here's some more information which kind of shows some of the details for private lots and parking lots. And so similarly, the main theme is keep that distance as much as possible, not the distance between the tables, the distance between the people. People should, of course, always wear their masks, make sure that they're washing their hands, and no crowding. That's the other thing we want to make sure of. So that's most of what I have to share. I'm going to turn it over to Palak, and I apologize, folks. I do need to jump on to another thing, so I will stop sharing and hand it back to Melissa and the team. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share this information with you. If questions do come back to the group, to Melissa, then I will certainly do my best to try and respond to them, as will the rest of the team. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mike. And we'll go over questions at the end. And since Mike has to jump off, if nobody else that's still on is able to answer them, Mike will shoot them over to you. So thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Everyone have a great day.
All right, Palak, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm on. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Palak Raval-Nelson. I'm the Director of Environmental Health Services for the Health Department. I have worked with a lot of you on the call, and I just want to start by saying that these are do's and don'ts, and they're general overall based on what we've seen, but that doesn't mean that we will not entertain specific ideas that if a specific establishment has an idea about how they want to address something differently, I will gladly welcome that, and we can review it with you and we can share it with the commissioner's office. All of these do's and don'ts and requirements. So the way that this works, just for context, is I'm a division director for one of, there's 8 divisions. Well, there's 9 now in the health department. One of them is the COVID division now. And we all report through deputy commissioners to the commissioner. The decisions for when and how things are done for COVID and how our, you know, kind of guidance are set are based on data and information on a case level from our Division of Disease Control and the COVID division, and then the commissioner's office along with the governor's office and the mayor, and they all make decisions. So all of these things, I will preface that, and as Mike mentioned, the controlling factor is the constant changes that occur with this virus and the pandemic. And, you know, we are basing decisions based on science and coming up with guidelines, and then with the caveat that we'll gladly look at things on an individual case-by-case basis as needed. So I'm going to take you through some do's and don'ts, and we're going to cover masks and facial covering, barriers, distancing, reduction of crowds, and communication. Next, please. So masks and facial covering. So this is just a picture. Again, I've been spending a lot of time out in the field, so these are some pictures of how to properly wear a face covering. It covers your nose and your mouth. Next, please. One of the biggest things that we see, the don'ts, are the masks usually slide off and people expose their nose, or people will go ahead and take the mask off to speak. And it can be very challenging and very difficult, especially when it is hot outside and you're working and the mask is on. But one of the best ways that we know to protect ourselves and everybody else is to keep that mask on your nose and your mouth. Next, please. So barriers. Barriers are really designed to protect the staff and the patrons. So next slide, please. And there should be barriers at pickup windows or service windows. So if you are doing takeout only or takeout beverages only, you want to go ahead and have a barrier. And the barrier can be anything that is, most recently we were at an outdoor dining street closure, and in between the tables, they literally took some clear plastic, you know, shower curtain-esque type of material and hung that down. So that can serve as a barrier. Other places have gotten very elaborate per the pictures, you know, with plexiglass. But wherever possible, if you have a question about that, we will gladly talk it through and see what makes most sense. Next slide, please. The don'ts would be no barrier at the bar, or having a service window that's open completely without a barrier where people can come and pick up their food or beverages, like in the second picture. Next, please. Distancing. So social distancing as well as covering is very key to all of this, and it's 6 feet, 360 degrees all the way around. So a lot of times we think it's just in front of us, but it's all the way around. So these are some do's of actual ways that people have set up the tables and everything. And this is the way that you can set it up for outdoor seating and minimize crowds and set it up from a social distance standpoint. Next, please. Again, these are do's. You want to make sure you have some kind of markings that show if people are going to be waiting, or people are we don't want lines forming as much as possible, but if there is going to be a place and a space for a line, you want to mark things off. These are kind of fancy. Other places use simple things as spray paint or tape to mark the ground, and that's completely acceptable as long as it's 6 feet. Next, please. The don'ts would be tables right next to each other. In these two images, people sitting very close together. So you can have tables next to each other. Some establishments, because of their very nature of their footprint for outside, have tables next to each other, but what they choose is they sanitize one table and leave it open and empty, and they use the other table, and then when that other table folks are done eating and they leave, they then occupy that clean table that was sitting there left vacant. So that's always an option. Or most recently, we were at the street closure on Passyunk Avenue this weekend, and what you can do is mark off the tables that you're not going to be using with tape, with big X's on there that say, you know, this is how we're separating and encouraging the social distancing. Next, please. Reduction of crowds. So we have learned, next slide, please, that one of the other best ways of minimizing the spread of COVID is to reduce the number of people that are together in any one space at any one time. So food establishments that have square footage space outside of their establishment, the maximum occupancy outdoors in the city of Philadelphia, I'm not talking about the state, I'm talking city specific only, is 50 people. And I know there are some establishments, maybe in the upper Northeast or other parts of the city, that may have very large capacity for outdoor seating. And for those folks, I would say, you know, we can follow up with your specific plan. But majority of the places, and again, we've been out conducting inspections for outdoor dining, have a fairly limited amount of space. So they set up their tables with the social distancing and have capacity of up to 50 folks outside. You can have up to 6 people at a table, you know, maximum seating per family unit or per friend unit. It can't be more than 6 at a table. Next, please. What we don't want is this. A lot of people jammed in together, one contiguous table that can seat multiple people, or in the other picture with the lights overhead, people are just standing at tables with beverages, no masks, and just congregating. You know, some places we've seen kind of upwards of crowds that have formed. And so everybody's aware, we often, the way that we find out about these things is we receive pictures and citizen complaints, and that's when we go out to these establishments. Next, please. Communication. It's very important that you go ahead and communicate to your patrons, communicate to your staff about the need for masks, the need for proper hand washing, the need for social distancing. All those things need to be communicated. And so there are a lot of signs that are available through the health department and the city's website. You can also make up your own signs. You also want to have signage at your door about how many people you're going to let in to use the toileting facilities, and you can determine that based on how many toilets you have access to in your establishment. And when folks are going in to use the facilities, you just want to remind them that they got to put their mask back on, because at the table while they're eating and drinking, they probably have taken off their mask. So you want to just go ahead and make sure you reiterate that, okay? The other thing for outdoor, before I get to this slide, is that you want to be mindful that for right now, there is not smoking and hookah. Smoking outside of an establishment is not permitted unless you can have enough square footage distance of 25 feet from any opening or door. So, and that's something that we've been dealing with directly with establishments that are permitted to do hookah. Okay, the next slide, please. Obviously, you don't want to, you know, a sign that just says, come in, we're open, and then everybody's congregating and there's no masks or face coverings or anything else. And then the next slide, please. And the other main information is that the current food safety regs and all of the other city ordinances and everything else are still in place and do apply. So when we go out to do inspections, and we've been doing inspections throughout the pandemic, we were never really closed. We were servicing complaints and conducting food safety inspections for those establishments that had just dropped down to takeout only. So, you know, all of the other regulations and requirements are still in place and apply. Next, please. So if you have specific questions, The phone number that's listed on this slide, you can always call us. We have a live person that does answer the phone. And this is also, if you're trying to get a hold of me, they will find me or email me. And I will be happy to talk with you. And then the next slide, this is my email address. And again, you know, we will go ahead, and if you have a specific design that is, you know, specific to your establishment, we will gladly review that and follow up with you. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Palak. I know we have some questions coming in, so we'll go through those. And if you guys don't ask a few questions, I always have some questions, as you all know. But I do want to say, through all of this, through a gray area and trying to make black and white out of gray, I just want to thank Palak and Dawn and Joshua, everybody from the city departments that have just been so responsive to us and have worked through a lot of those questions. So, and especially for taking the time today to answer the questions that we're going to receive. Just want to thank you all, because it really has been a help for us to try and get communication out as well. So thank you. All right, let's go into some streets questions, and if we don't have an answer, we will get it out to you. So let's see. Does the temporary sidewalk cafe license still expire at the end of December? Who wants to handle the street questions?
I guess I can answer that.
Thanks, Sarah.
Sarah Damo, L&I. So currently, yes, it does expire at the end of December. That's how the legislation is written. Of course, we can always revisit that closer to that time if necessary. I'm sure there will be legislation introduced to extend that.
Any discussions about extending the closure time past 10 p.m.?
Currently, we haven't discussed it. I think, you know, this is all still pretty new, so we're trying to see how this first iteration works before we start making too many changes. So currently, we haven't discussed going any later than 10 p.m.
And Sarah, to tee off of that question, can you clarify, is 10 p.m. just for outdoor seating? So if somebody has a existing sidewalk license before the extension, or they have outdoor seating within their space, can they have a different closing time in those scenarios?
Unfortunately, it's not as clear cut as I would like it to be, but existing sidewalk cafes can be open past 10 p.m. Only the temporary ones are restricted to 10 p.m. As far as outdoor seating within your property lines, if you have an existing, you know, outdoor patio area where you already had seating and that was already permitted, you would not be held to the 10 p.m. cutoff unless there was like a proviso or something on your permit. If you obtained a temporary use permit, which is something that was also introduced around the same time as these temporary sidewalk cafes, that is also restricted to 10 p.m.
Thank you. And then Sarah, could you clarify, if you know, for the letter to extend onto somebody else's property, what does that letter have to state?
It's actually a form that you fill out. It's on L&I's website. It's on the same page as where you find the application for streeteries and sidewalk cafes. The form is filled out by the person who's filing the application, and in the form you're just stating that you have obtained the adjacent owner's permission. We don't need anything from that owner verifying their permission was granted, but we're asking you to confirm that you have their permission.
Okay, now we're going to get into the hard-hitting questions, Sarah. I'm sorry that Mike abandoned you for all of this. I understand that some businesses have been penalized because their immediately adjacent businesses are only 15 feet to 17 feet, while others have 50 to 60 feet of immediate adjacent neighbors. How does L&I make that distinction? And then on top of that, Restaurants that have skinny neighbors should not be penalized on their ability to extend, especially if they have permission from all of the businesses and neighbors. Good luck to you.
So I guess just off the bat, I want to say it's not L&I's decision. It's, you know, as the whole, this is a huge working group that we meet regularly to discuss these requirements. And L&I gets the really fun job of enforcing them. When we started off, we did discuss you can extend into one adjacent frontage if you have permission. We've since kind of become a little bit more lax, and we've said like you can extend onto either side. I think the concern is that there are a couple of concerns. One is that we don't want, you know, somebody going 10 properties on either side of them, having more than 50 people. Also, if this is going to include a streetery as well, that's it's eliminating a lot of existing parking. So the decision to only allow first one adjacent property and now two was really just to have some sort of grasp on like keeping it relatively small, giving people a little bit more room to work with, but not going overboard. And I mean, these are regulations that can be changed in the future. So I think this is just the first iteration. We're always willing to kind of explore other options as time goes on.
The next question, does the PLCB extension of premises automatically extend to the adjacent business that the sidewalk cafe license has extended to? I can take this one and give you a break, Sarah, if you'd like.
Sure.
You do. If you are extending your premise, you do need to inform the LCB that you're doing so. So you do need to go onto PLCB Plus, click that emergency extension of premise, and show them that you're extending beyond your current license space. So you do have to check that box. You have to check your box with the city, but you also have to inform the state of Pennsylvania and the LCB that you're extending there. So there's two checks that have to occur in terms of that extension. And then I guess the next one would also be for me. For restaurants outside of Philadelphia that are limited to the 25% occupancy mandate for indoor dining, when does this mandate expire? Tara, your guess is as good as mine. We asked if it was going to be a 2-week 25% rule. They said no, it's going to be longer than that, but they said they don't want it to be forever. So at this point, I think our COVID counts are going to dictate how long that 25% rules go for. Okay, Palak, I think we're getting on to you. Could the rules about social clubs be clarified? There is a Legion in our neighborhood that currently has their bar open.
Oh, darn it, Sarah, I guess it's on me. So social clubs, there shouldn't be anybody inside, okay? They're in the city of Philadelphia, there's still no indoor dining or indoor cocktail service as far as the social clubs are concerned. I will say, when we do get complaints and we've gone into places that have had people, we've gone in with PLCB, specifically liquor control enforcement, and folks have been closed. So, you know, there's no indoor service. If a social club or a bar is serving alcohol outside, you know, through a delivery window, that's fine. But I'll stop there as the response. There's no indoor activity at this point.
And then Palak, to just play off of that in case this question isn't asked later, in terms of private events that are limited to 25 people, that's currently in the guidance. Is any entity, for example, a hotel, able to have food and beverage service for a private event of less than 25 people at this time?
At this time, that's really a gray area. We would need to know more specific details of what it is that they're proposing and how they would be controlling all of that. So I wouldn't want to blanketly say yes. I think we need to get specifics on it, and getting specifics on it is actually a big help to the establishment as well, because it helps us to be proactive in case there are complaints about a situation. So that's how I'll leave it. If someone wants to do an event for some reason, then we can follow up accordingly. Since there are no special events in the city, but it's a hotel and they're going to have people inside, we can follow up specifically with that establishment.
I think you're going to get a lot of calls, Palak. I apologize in advance.
No, that's fine. And I see that the slide is still up there, Eric, with my email address, and that's fine. And for what it's worth, I don't know that I do stop working, so that's fine. We will help as many people as we can.
Okay, next question, Palak, for you. Are we pushing the green phase back from August 1st? This needs to be answered, as operators will purchase more this week if we are still going forward to the green phase on August 1st, or the inside green phase on August 1st.
So again, I will say that those decisions are based on the case level data that comes in, and they're made by the commissioner and Mayor Kenny and Managing Director Abernathy. So at this point, I have not heard anything. I know that there is a press conference tomorrow, and I'm not sure of what the case level data is as of today. So I would suggest that, folks wait to hear the specifics from the press conference, and then I can do my part to ask that question as well.
Okay, I think we answered this, but this might be another way about it. Are private venues with outdoor eating space within their property limited by the 10 p.m. end time, or does that only apply if you have a temporary permit? I think, Sarah, you answered that question, correct?
Right. It only applies if you have either the temporary sidewalk cafe, temporary streetery, or temporary use permit. If your permit or license was issued prior to COVID and it's not one of these temporary licenses or permits, then there's no restriction.
Okay. Does the 50 people limit include staff? I think this is on you again, Palak, sorry.
Sure, no problem. So the 50 people limit, most establishments, what I've seen is that the bulk of the staff are within the kitchen. And, back in the actual establishment, preparing the food or the beverages, most of the time it's about 1 or 2 servers outside. So as long as you don't have, outdoor cooking consisting of 25 people and then 50 customers and then wait staff, everybody should be fine. So most of the time, we're looking at it again. My staff are counting when we're out there doing inspections, but we haven't come across that as an issue yet. The bulk of the staff are inside the building doing the work of preparing the meals and the beverages.
To go off of that, Palak, since we have a theme going, with the 50-person limit for outdoor events, when we have a street closure, does the 50-person limit apply to each restaurant operation, or is it universal across the entire street closure?
Sure, and there are no events. I just want to say that again. There are no events approved in the city of Philadelphia until next year, but the street closure, so the rule of thumb is really up to 50 people per establishment footprint outside, provided that you can adequately socially distance your tables and your seating. So if you have, enough capacity on your footprint for whether it's a street closure, a streetery, or what have you, and we're specifically talking about a street closure, and you can set up enough tables that are socially distanced apart, then it would be for your footprint. Okay?
Thank you. And the next question I might be able to take a stab at, and then Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong. To go ends at 11 still. I'm assuming you mean spirits to go or mixed drinks to go. If my upstairs outdoor deck that was open till 2 a.m. always was open till 2 a.m. Can I do later than 11? Stephen, if you're talking about cocktails to go, that's a state law, and that is a hard stop at 11 p.m. So you might be able to keep your outdoor deck open later until 11, but any cocktails to go has to end at 11 p.m. Next question. Palak, they want you to tell the future, so good luck to you. Have there been any discussions of any kind regarding eliminating outdoor dining? I guess that's connected to a potential increase in cases.
Not that I'm aware of. And, you know, listen, I mean, I share the sentiment. We want folks to we want to stay open, right? We want our city to be working. We want people to be gainfully employed in restaurants, and but at the same time, we want to balance to make sure everybody's safe and healthy. So I have not heard anything about any steps forward or backwards. When I do and can share, I will gladly share, but no, I have not heard that we're going backwards.
Okay, another question connected to that. Currently 163 cases is the 7th-day average. I'm assuming this is Dr. Fogerty, say they wanted cases to be at 80. Is that correct?
I don't know that I can make a comment on that. I can get you an answer from our Division of Disease Control or the COVID division or the commissioner, but I can't make a comment on that. That's not my specialty.
Okay. Palak, I think we're going to finish out with you. We're nearing the end of the questions. If you have an outdoor wedding with 50 guests maximum, are all guests required to wear masks for the duration of the ceremony?
The only time masks or face covering should come off is when you're eating and drinking. So throughout the ceremony, masks should be kept on. You know, obviously the bride and groom have to speak vows and may remove that for that aspect of it, but the rest of the time the masks should be kept on, excuse me, because we know that's really a way to keep everybody around you safe is by wearing your mask.
Okay, we're going down. This is the last one I have for right now, but by the time I'm finished it, I might have more. But so to clarify, even if an establishment has room for more than 50 people socially distanced, the capacity is limited to 50. This is for outdoor dining. Then they go, would a garden area and sidewalk area count as a different location? Could they do 50 seats for each, or is it 50 for the entirety of the outdoor licensed area?
So that would be something that we would want to look at the garden area and the other areas and get a sense of what can be done safely. And we would want some additional information on that.
Okay.
All right, because the
That is-
seating is based on social distancing and spatial distancing.
And then if we get if we might get one more question for you, Palak, that it might be one of those they have to ask you individually, but if you are a caterer and you're asked to cater a private event in someone's home or someone's private office space and it's less than 25 people, is that permitted? So it wouldn't be in a licensed establishment, it would be in a home or a private office space.
Sure, and I don't know what the background noise is, but again, that, you know, the rule of thumb here is that you want to limit the number of people and limit the number of exposures. So if someone's having a private party in their home and wanting you to cater, and there's a lot of people there and people aren't wearing masks, that could become an issue. So I would suggest that the caterer would specifically reach out and ask those questions, and they can reach out to us and follow up, but I don't think that's such a cut and dry answer. We have gotten a lot of complaints about people kind of having these indoor events with catering operations that where there's no masking and it's a private party and people think that it's acceptable. But, coronavirus doesn't really care. It's going to spread regardless. So I would just suggest that the caterer reach out to us and we can look at the individual operation.
Okay. That actually concludes, I thought we were going to get more questions. So Palak and Sarah pitching in for Mike, you guys did a good job because I thought we were going to get more.
I actually have
Thank
one
you.
quick thing to add before I forget. Regarding the extension in front of, if your neighbor's property is relatively small and you'd like to extend further than that, although it would not be permitted by right on the streetery or sidewalk cafe license, you can always reach out to, it's primarily done through streets department, but the street closure permits, they have more flexibility with that. So if you wanted to kind of consider like a partial street closure and propose that idea, that's a different route that you could go through.
That's great, Sarah. Thank you. All right. Well, we went a little bit past 3 o'clock. Wait, all right, hold on, Sarah, you just opened up a can of worms.
Sorry about that.
Who would you contact for that?
I
guess
that would be, I think that Joshua sent the links earlier through the, on our website with the reopening guidance. All the information is on there. So instead of being considered a streetery or sidewalk cafe, you would go under the street closure.
Okay. And then, Palak, I might be able to answer this for you or Sarah, but what is the best way for residents, et cetera, to report violators?
Me and
Palak are going to have two different answers.
Sure. No, well, the response I will say is they can two ways. So the way that the complaints are coming in are 311 gives my office a report every day about the violators, and we service those complaints within 48 hours, depending on the day and the time we receive the complaint. And they can also reach out to the phone number that's on the previous slide than the one that's on the system now, the 685-7495 number. They can report complaints through that. So those are two ways. Those have been the ways from the beginning of all of this. And we, like I said, get out there within 48 hours and service the complaints.
And then Sarah, do you have a different answer for
my answer is going to be, it was going to be 311. I thought Palak was going to give this number, so I was going to say 311.
Well, we went a little over an hour, but we started a little late. But like I said, thank you everybody who participated today. Thank you, Sarah, Palak. I know Mike's not here. Joshua from Commerce for setting all of this up. I don't know if we got all of the black and white that we wanted, but we're in a little less gray. And I think with everything going on in the world right now, that might be the best that we can hope for right now. So thank you. And we will, I don't think we had any unanswered questions, but if I receive more questions, I will definitely shoot it over to all of you. So with that, I think we will end the webinar. And thank you, everyone. We will get this PowerPoint palette. Can this be shared?
Absolutely. And also, I will put in a plug. If you go to the health department's YouTube channel, there's a couple of great videos on there about what to do, hand washing, childcare, and outdoor dining. And Joshua attached a link. He's so awesome. So please share that, folks. Go on there. If there are other things that you want us to make videos about, we'll gladly do it. Okay, thank you for sharing the link.
All right, everyone, stay safe, and we'll hope to have some positive news and some lesser cases soon for everyone. So thanks. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.